Hello.
Hello, how are you?
That's very good. And you?
Good, thank you.
Great. So, we are here in Microfactory, a place like home, a project by Open Dot and Dot 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 inside the exhibition 999 Questions on Contemporary Living in Triennale di Milano. Our project is about exploring the future of 4 important areas of everyday life. And today we talk about food with Lynette Kucsma, co-founder of Natural Machine. Thank you, Lynette, for joining in.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
So it's great to have you here. Natural Machine is a company that produced Foodini, one of the first 3D printer that can print food. So can you tell us a bit what's Foodini and why is it different from other 3D printers?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to think about with Foodini and 3D food printing is that at the end of the day, it's really a kitchen appliance. So it's a new type of kitchen appliance. It doesn't do what your current kitchen appliances do. But I think one of the ways that we're very different from any of our competitors, and yes, we do have competitors, so the 3D food printing market is growing, is that we ship with empty stainless steel food capsules. So we actually encourage people to use their own fresh, real ingredients. I think sometimes when people think about 3D printing, they tend to think about, the coffee makers that ship with capsules that you must buy that are pre-filled. So we're so ingrained with that concept. But that's the opposite of what we do. So we allow you to use your own fresh, real ingredients.
That's great. Actually, even in normal 3D printers, there's a huge fight between people that wants to use every material and do experiments and company that force you to buy their own material. So it seems you're more on the open and accessible to experiment side, I would say.
Correct. And we do that for a very definitive reason. It's partially why we started the company in the first place. It's because we want people to get back into their kitchens and cooking with more real food. So if we went the forcing a pre-filled food capsule route, that's not really all about real food, is it? So we wanted to make sure people can use their own ingredients.
So it's super nice to hear about this. And last time we spoke, you told me a bit on why you started the project and how it started. And do you mind to tell us a bit?
Sure. So we started 5 years ago, actually. So that's kind of a long time for a startup. We hit a milestone by hitting 5 years. So we've been doing this for quite some time, always focused on 3D food printing. So the big vision is that we believe in 10 to 15 years, 3D food printing will become a common kitchen appliance, like your oven or your microwave is a common kitchen appliance today. But why did we do that? Well, for consumers, it's like I said, we want to get people back into their kitchens, cooking with fresh, real ingredients. And the answer to why we created Foodini is somewhat obvious when you look into a supermarket and you see the aisles and aisles of processed food. So we like to tell people that, you're practically eating 3D printed food already if you eat anything that comes from a food manufacturer, anything that's packaged. Because what a food manufacturer does is they take food, they push it through machines, they shape it, and they form it. So we've taken that exact same concept and shrunk it down to a design kitchen appliance. But the big difference is we allow you to control your own ingredients. So that's the big vision as to why we started Natural Machines and Foodini, to get people to use their own ingredients. Now, today, we're not targeting home kitchen users just yet. That will be with the next generation device that comes out. Today, we're focused on professional kitchen users. And why are they interested in 3D food printing? Well, it's really for a number of reasons, but 2 reasons keep popping up as the dominant ones. One is because it allows them to do food presentations that are simply not possible by hand or with any other kitchen appliance. So chefs are always looking for new ways to present food. The second reason is automation. Now, not automation in the sense of robots totally taking over jobs in the kitchen and chefs not existing anymore. That's not our intention, and there's no chef that has ever been worried about that. Because again, if you look at Foodini as a kitchen appliance standpoint, then it all makes sense. So it's automation in the sense of if a kitchen appliance can do something faster than you can by hand, then they take advantage of that. So it's no different than a chef using a food processor to chop up tomatoes for a tomato sauce versus using Foodini to shape and form and do food presentations. So the whole reason why we started everything was always because we saw an issue in the food industry and we wanted to solve that. And 3D food printing was one of the best ways to do that.
So it seems you don't have to be a geek to use this kind of 3D printer.
You do not. So even though it does sound pretty geeky and techy, keeping in mind that it's a kitchen appliance, nobody reads kitchen user manuals of how to use a kitchen appliance. So we're assuming that will be the case with Foodini. So we're keeping it really easy to use, and you do not have to be totally into tech or geeked out to actually use it.
Okay, that's great. So you were saying before that if we eat anything that comes out of a factory, it's basically already 3D printed somehow. And when we talk about food, that's basically the thing we use the most. So how do you think Foodini can fit into the new discussion about sustainability and short chains, short supply chains, circular economy?
Well, actually, one of our investors is based out of New York City, and their focus is on circular economy. Those are the only types of companies they invest in. So how do we fit into circular economy? Well, we actually lower food waste, and we do that across the value chain. So that's from the home kitchen user that can print what they want to eat and nothing more. So you wouldn't have to become reliant on buying, let's say, a packaged product that has 4 serving sizes when you only have 3 people in your family or in the household, and you either overeat or that food goes to waste. So you can actually print what you want to eat and nothing more. But we actually go up the entire food chain with that concept to food manufacturers and prove the same concept. So one example I can share with you is that we actually work with a fishery company in Iceland they sell fillets of fish. And what happens, of course, when you fillet a fish is there's still meat left on the bones, and that typically either gets tossed away as food waste or it might be turned into pet food or what have you, but it moves out of the human food chain. So what we're actually doing is we're recapturing that food, which is actually very nutritious. It's still very good food. It's quite healthy. And we're actually printing it to make it look beautiful again in terms of food presentation, so people are encouraged to eat it. So again, it's all about that type of food presentations and encouraging people to eat those things. So we are actually impacting sustainability and lowering food waste.
It's interesting what you're saying about the aspect of food. There's a huge problem about, growing apples, and if the apples has a spot somewhere, you have to throw it away, because otherwise it will be impossible to sell it anyway. So it seems that we can use these technologies to face that part of the problem as well.
That's right. So the whole ugly fruit and vegetable concept, or ugly cuts of meat, are traditionally wasted more often than not these days, which is not very good, obviously. That we have a lot of food that we throw away that can actually feed a lot of people. So recapturing those types of foods so we can make them into a 3D print actually does save a lot of food.
When I started to play with 3D printers, 7 years ago actually, I realized that one of the most interesting parts is related to the community. So yes, you can find a lot of information online, you can share ideas online, you can share 3D models online. Is it Foodini interested in that as well? Are you nudging the sharing?
Yes, you can also share recipes online. So we talk about Foodini being a 3D food printer, but that's only one piece of technology that's built into the device. We're also an IoT, Internet of Things kitchen appliance, which means we're connected to the internet. So that does allow you to do things like share recipes or browse for recipes. So there is definitely a community aspect that's a part of it.
And who's making the models or the recipes? How is it working?
Actually, you as the user could make models. So what we didn't want to do is become a bottleneck. There are some 3D food printing companies that require you as the user to go to them so that they can basically code your model and get it printable. So we did not want to do that. Foodini actually comes with software called Foodini Creator. Part of that has shapes that are available for use that are pre-made. So the shapes are pre-made into the software. But we also spent a lot of time writing software that you can actually create your own shapes. So as an example, if you're at the event tonight and you take a photo of a logo, you can actually run that through our software and print that logo. So again, we're trying to make it so that the community can make their own recipes and their own shapes. And then you can take it a step further and actually share it with the rest of the community if you so choose.
And you said that at the moment your target is more professional chefs, right?
Correct.
Are they interested in learning how to design something, or what's their reaction to the process? I would say it's very different from what they do usually.
Yeah, it depends on the level of chef you're talking about. If you're talking about Michelin-starred chefs, they tend to have a bunch of techie toys and gadgets in their kitchen, so they're quite used to the new technologies coming out. So again, you're familiar with 3D printing in general that's non-food based. That means if you've seen 3D printing software, it's actually quite complicated, quite technical. We realized we had to move people away from that because no chef is going to learn how to do that on their own. They have other things to do in the kitchen. So we simplified that process so that chefs can make their own designs. And that's a very big point for them. Because, of course, chefs, when they're creating their own designs, their own plates, and they want to be unique, they don't want to be forced to use a library of shapes at all times that everybody else will use. So we actually enable people to use their own shapes and then share that later on if they want to. So the reaction from the professional kitchen user market has been very positive. So when people first hear about Foodini and 3D food printing, they like it, but they might keep it at arm's length because, you know, it's a new technology. They're not too sure what it is yet. But I can safely say within the first 5 minutes of seeing Foodini in person, they get it right away. They totally understand the purpose, and they're quite excited to use it.
And do you have also some pioneers that use it at their place, at their home? So not professional chef, but let's say every one of us could use it?
Well, we're not saying that we don't sell to home kitchen users today. We will. If you really want a device and you want to be early access in technology as a home user, you're more than welcome to have a device. But the reason why we say we're not targeting home kitchen users yet is because we know from all of our market research that we need one additional piece of functionality that's currently not available on the device we're shipping today. And that is the capability to cook. So in today's device that we're have out on the market, we have room for up to 5 food capsules that automatically exchange as needed. And those individual food capsules can be heated. So that's good for things like keeping chocolate at a good melting point or printing warm mashed potatoes, for example. But if you were printing meat or fish, you would actually have to take that out and cook it in some other way. The next generation device will be able to cook as well. And that's really where we know that, you know, people in their kitchens, a lot of us don't have huge kitchens. It's limited real estate. So the more multifunctional you can have your kitchen appliances, the better. And so when we put out a 3D food printer that can cook and or print, then you have a very multifunctional device. So our view of the kitchen of the future is that it's going to become much smarter, but your kitchen appliances also have to work much harder. So what we are not doing is we're not doing something like where you have a pasta maker that's dedicated to making pasta only, or an ice cream maker that's dedicated to ice cream only. And those devices tend to fall back further and further into the back of your cabinet, and they don't see the light of day. So we're making our 3D food printer that can cook as well, where you can cook, or you can print, or you can do both. So that means that in our future, will we need an oven, a stove, a microwave, a 3D food printer that cooks? Probably not, because they're going to start consolidating functionality into devices that work that much harder for you.
So you were saying that Foodini works with capsules, with syringes, right? Something similar to that?
We don't use syringes very much. It's not mandatory to use syringe systems. One is because, A, it's slow. Nobody's going to wait hours for dinner. So we know 3D food printing has to be much faster than typical printing. And of course, there's a cleanability issue as well. So we wanted to make sure that with our capsules, everything was very easy to use and easy to clean, because nobody likes that kitchen appliance that may make a certain process easy, but then the cleanup is a nightmare. So we definitely kept that easy to use.
Okay, and what can we print?
Well, you can print all types of things. There's a common misconception with 3D food printing that the ingredient that you put in must be a slurry, or it must have gelling agents added, or it must have this baby food type of texture. With the way we're doing it, you do not, because we actually have different nozzle sizes, which is pretty much different sizes of a hole that the food will go through in a capsule. That means we can accommodate different textures. So things like we can print couscous with chunks of vegetables in it without blending or without processing the couscous, so you have texture there. We can do things like print mini burgers with chunks of walnuts and cranberry in it that doesn't have to be processed into a slurry at all. It's proper ground beef with other things added to it. So you can use different textures. Now, can you print every single texture? No. You know, it's still early days with 3D food printing, but we're definitely beyond the stage where you would have this mentality of where everything needs to be a liquefied type of ingredient. That's not the case. And what a lot of our chefs do today is there's another misconception that people tend to think whatever comes out of the 3D food printer is the final dish. That's all you do with it. But, you know, some of us might go home for dinner tonight and perhaps grill a steak on the grill and steam some vegetables and maybe have a casserole in the oven, and we take all those different kitchen appliances to make our final dish. It's no different with a 3D food printer. So what chefs do today to add even more texture to dishes is they will part print, part complete by hand a dish. So you do have all those different types of textures that we're used to.
So I checked your website, and there's a lot of lovely pictures, so I suggest everybody to go and have a look at Natural Machine. But what actually catch my attention is a definition that you put on the website that says the Natural Machine is going to make preparing food healthier, easier, and much more fun. Can you explain us these three things, why you think it will work in these three ways?
Sure. Well, the healthier bit is mainly because we allow you to use your own food to print, and we're not forcing you to use any types of our ingredients or pre-filled food capsules. So think about sometimes when you walk through the supermarket and you're buying packages of food, whether it's cereal or bread or pasta or crackers or breakfast bars or any number of products, that if you were to make that in your own kitchen by hand, if it requires any type of shaping, forming, or layering, that's really where a 3D food printer can do it faster and easier for you. So the healthy aspect comes from the fact that we allow you to use your own food. Now, can you print just chocolate all day and candy and, you know, not be too healthy? Of course you can, just like in your oven. Just like in your oven, you can make anything you want. But the point is we enable you to use your own fresh, real ingredients, and hopefully you use some vegetables in there as well. So what was the next part after that? So it's easier.
Easier?
Mm-hmm.
And much more fun.
Okay, so the easier bit is, we didn't build a 3D food printer just to be a novelty. Now, can it be a novelty? Absolutely. So if you look on our website, you might see a head printed out of butter. Now, do we need a head printed out of butter in the human race to survive? No, we don't. You know, those are the things that are fun, they're novel, we're giving you permission to play with your food. That butter head was actually created for a client that had a dinner party of strangers, and they had bread and butter on the table. The butter was in the shape of a head, and they wanted to have a conversation piece, and that definitely worked. It broke the ice. So people got friendly with each other very quickly. So, but the whole easier part is if you're going to do things that require that layering or food shaping or forming. And I'll give you a basic example of even basic crackers. So people tend to think with 3D food printing, we think of the fancy shapes and different things you can do, and that you can definitely do. But I would ask you to think about a square cracker. Now, I have 2 kids, and they like crackers. I like crackers. When I go to a supermarket, I have a really hard time finding crackers that I like that are healthy for you, because a lot of them contain too much oil or too much salt or palm oils or, things I don't like, or E numbers or preservatives to allow them to sit on the shelf for several months. So for me to make crackers at home, you can use any type of dough you want, and that's not necessarily the hard part. The difficult part is, you need to have a clean work surface. I have 2 kids, so I rarely have a clean work surface. I have to make the effort to clean the work surface. I have to roll out the dough really thin, and even if I'm cutting it to squares, I still have to do that. And those types of doughs are fairly difficult to work with because they're sticky dough, and if you add too much flour, then it doesn't have the right mouthfeel. But it's very easy to make the dough, put it in a food capsule, and print individual crackers. And that's really where it becomes a lot easier.
Sorry. Please go on.
And I was just going to go on to the last part, which is the fun part. The fun part is that people tend to think, it's fun for kids, right? Well, yes, it is. There's another photo of a spinach quiche dinosaur that I made for my kids, actually. The reason why I made that, there's a cute personal story behind that, is I have 2 kids under 10 years old. I try to get them to eat their spinach. I make a spinach quiche. Green is my son's favorite color at the time, so I try to sell it at the dinner table like, this is great. We're going to have a green pie for dinner. Isn't this great? And my kids are like, no, we're not having it. So I finally convinced them to try a bite, and they both try a bite, but they claim they don't like it, which is fine. Not everybody likes every food. It's impossible that everybody likes every food. But then I took the exact same recipe a week later and printed it in the shape of dinosaurs. Exact same recipe, different shape. And my kids ate every single one. My dinosaurs became extinct very quickly. And it was fun. My kids actually came into the kitchen. They picked the dinosaur shapes. We made the ingredients ourselves. So another misconception about 3D food printing is that people think in 2 to 3 generations we'll have, the Star Trek replicator. You just press a button or say what you want and food will magically appear. We're all going to lose the capability to cook in a couple generations. But that's actually not the case with how we're doing it, because following along with that example, my kids came into the kitchen. They were putting nutmeg in the spinach mixture, and they were making the dough for the quiche base. And they were actually learning more about what's in their food rather than taking a box of something frozen and throwing it in the oven to make. But it's also fun for adults, too. I think you would be surprised. Now 3D food printing is quite a novelty now, just in terms of even watching it. So one of the advantages to having a 3D food printer is, especially with 5 capsules that automatically exchange, so you can do multi-ingredient prints, that you load up the printer and you can walk away and go do other things. But a lot of times, people don't walk away. They actually watch it because it's quite fun to see it building up layer by layer and making this creation. So 3D food printing, you can have fun with your food. We give you permission. Play with your food. So it can do those fun shapes as well, but it can also do those basic shapes.
Oh, that's great. Last time we spoke, you told me about a specific case of a Foodini user that was a hospital in Utah, if I remember properly. Can you tell us the story?
So basically what we're doing is we do work with hospitals. One of the ones we can talk about publicly is Utah Hospital. So they're using 3D food printing for a couple different use cases. One of the ones that they're proving today is that they have patients that have diseases that enable or actually give them trouble swallowing. So people have trouble swallowing proper food. So what typically happens in that environment is they would basically be given a bowl of mush, more or less. And, it's as unappetizing as it sounds. So people quickly lose interest no matter what flavor or what color it is, because it's not entertaining. It's not very interesting at all. So people that are sick end up eating less, which of course is not good. They get into this downward spiral where they don't get the nutrition they need to get better. So they've proven that if you print food that looks visually attractive and looks like food that everybody else eats, that they will sit at the dinner table with their other relatives and other friends and eat normally. And they're more enticed to eat the food, even though it's a soft texture. So visual appearances are very important with food. Whether we recognize it or not, we're always subconsciously judging our food by its looks. It's not just about the taste or the flavors. So that's been a proven study with the hospital. Now, the second case study that they're looking to do is the next phase of this particular project. is to take advantage of the IoT capabilities. So that way, where the future of food is going is you will have the ability, again, not mandatory, but you will have the ability to customize your food. So a consumer example is if we're wearing more wearables these days, they will become smarter. So if my wearable knows I went for a 5K run this morning and it was cloudy in Barcelona, so I didn't get enough vitamin D and maybe my iron levels are low, I can actually print a breakfast bar that ups those particular nutrition elements. So the hospital is looking to do the same thing with their patients so that they can up certain nutrition, customize nutrition for their patients. And they can even take it a step further in the hospital environment by printing drugs in the food as well. So the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the States, a couple of years ago actually approved the printing of drugs, the 3D printing of drugs. So if you mix that with the 3D printing of food and customized nutrition, you now have something very powerful that doctors can administer to patients and monitor, because you'll be able to monitor that data as well. So the whole customization aspect is where IoT and 3D food printing is heading.
At the beginning, when we start to speak about interview you on, the 3D printer that can print food, I had no idea that there were so many possible consequences, it was really interesting to me, and it opened a bit my mind on what we can do. But there's still a part that it's tricky to me to digest, talking about food, mainly because we are in Italy. A while ago, you printed a pizza.
Yes. And as you can imagine, when we did that was a couple of years ago, we got a bit of a negative reaction from your country as to why we did that. So let me explain a little bit about why we did it and why it's not as crazy as it sounds. So first of all, I will say that if you make your own pizza by hand, by all means continue to do so. We're not trying to tell you otherwise. There were people that accused us of trying to get rid of pizzerias, and that is not the intention. We don't want to make everything into robots with that. So please, if you make your own pizza, continue to do so. And we've had some people come to us saying, well, it's really easy to make pizza. Why would you 3D print a pizza? Why do that? And the answer to that is, again, in the supermarket. Because if you look in the supermarkets and a lot of retail stores, there's entire sections dedicated to frozen pizzas, pre-made pizza crust, pre-made pizza things that you put together later on. So it's actually not that easy for everybody. So the reason why we 3D printed a pizza is to get people away from that frozen box or pre-made pizza doughs and pre-made pizza items, and actually make your own dough. So it's your normal dough that you would make, as if you were to make it by hand. You don't have to follow our recipes. You can use your own dough. And we printed it. So why did we print it? Well, because in the home kitchen aspect, there were people, again, who didn't have clear counter space to make the pizza dough. So keeping it in the printer, it keeps the space clear. We printed the dough. We printed the tomato sauce, which gave us a perfectly even layer of tomato sauce. Now, do you really need that, again, to survive and have a pizza? No, you don't. But it took about 30 seconds to print it, so we did. But the rest of the toppings were done by hand. So we took some shredded mozzarella cheese, as you do, and some toppings and spices into that by hand. So it's part printed, part done by hand. And the reason for that is because we do ask ourselves, is it faster, easier, and better to use Foodini or to use some other way? And in this case, it was faster, easier, and better to print the dough and the sauce, but faster, easier, and better to not use Foodini to do the cheese and the toppings. That was easier to do by hand. But the whole reason why we did 3D printed pizza in the first place as well is because NASA did it a couple of years back, the space agency. So everybody asked us where our 3D printed pizza was, so we did it.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think, again, if you think about Foodini as a kitchen appliance, so if you were making your own tomato sauce, for example, and you use a food processor to chop the tomatoes, or if you're making your own pizza dough and you use a food processor to knead the dough, then you're using a kitchen appliance. So I know sometimes people ask, well, why are you 3D printing anything? Because, when my grandmother makes pizza, it's made with love, and now you're taking that away. But if your grandmother was making that sauce with a food processor or making dough with a food processor to knead the dough, is that any less love? And the answer is no. She's simply using a kitchen appliance to help her make that homemade food. And again, using Foodini is still homemade food because it's your ingredients. It's your food. So when people start to think about it like that and get away from the 3D techie sounding bit of the product and more into it's a kitchen appliance and I'm using my own fresh real food, then it becomes a much better proposition for people to understand what we're trying to do.
That's great. Thank you so much for the time you gave us and the answers to our questions. I'd like to ask to the people here if anybody has a question that wants to ask to Lynette. I think I will give you the microphone so you can explain.
Okay. Hi there. I'm Stefano. So my question is basically, what advances does the company what are you working on for the close future, and what are you developing on the close future? And ultimately, what I'm interested in seeing, how do you see 3D printing food in, let's say, like 20 years? How do you think it will be? Will it be ubiquitous? Will it be, where will we find it? Will it just be maybe in supermarkets? Do you think in 20 years' time, will there be 3D printing in every main kitchen in people's homes? How do you see it? And that's the question.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll take that bit first of the future as to where we see things. So yes, we do believe in, I think your time period was 20 years. In 20 years' time, 3D food printers will become a common kitchen appliance in both home and professional kitchens. So this will be an appliance that, when you walk into a kitchen, you see an oven today, you're not surprised to see an oven. We think the same thing will happen with 3D food printers. Now, again, we're keeping the time frames real. So we are saying 10, 15, 20 years. It's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen in 5 years. So it's going to take some time. But we do believe it will become prevalent. And the reason why is because if you look at Foodini as that mini manufacturing concept, where we stop relying so much on mass-produced foods and actually follow macro trends where people want to know where their food comes from, what's in their food exactly, you're bringing that manufacturing concept to your kitchen. And that kind of leads into the first part of your question, whereas what are we working on? So in today's device, it's fairly new. 3D printing has been around since the 80s, but 3D food printing is a new concept. So it's fairly new, even though we've been working on it for 5 years. But what we're working on is to make as much of that, let's say that food manufacturer complexity and simplifying it for your kitchen. So an example I can give you is, let's look at Pinterest. So we just passed Christmas cookie season for Christmas. A lot of people make Christmas cookies, so they look on Pinterest for inspiration. So we believe in the future, what you'll see is not just a pin it button, but a print it button. And with a 3D food printer like Foodini, you will be able to make your own cookie dough, and you will be able to print the cookie, cook the cookie, and ice the cookie without touching it. So the machine will do all of that for you without you having to touch it. Whereas in today's device, you can print the cookie, but then you would have to pull it out and cook it in some other way. Then you can put the cookie back and decorate it, but that's a lot of steps. We're going to eliminate all those steps so you have that automation aspect, but you still have that control over your own fresh ingredients. So that's what we're working on for the future.
That's great. That's a question about how many cookies we can produce at the same time.
So Foodini is a certain size. So the dish that we have inside Foodini as standard is probably relative to a microwave dish. So if you think about that size dish, as many cookies as you can print on that dish is how many you can print at one time. So it's hard to say a number because I don't know the size of your cookies, right? So it depends on the size of your cookies. But if you look at a microwave-sized dish, that's the space we're looking at right now. Now, when we look back at that future scenario as to, 3D food printers being prevalent in all areas, the answer to that question you just asked will vary. And why is that? Because we've envisioned in the future that, if you think about microwaves, not in terms of functionality, but in terms of variety, microwaves come in a wide range of sizes, a wide range of functionality, and a wide range of prices. So you're going to see that type of variety in the future with 3D food printers. And another comment to tap into that as well is people do ask, how fast is 3D food printing? So is 3D food printing the fastest way to get food? The answer is no. The fastest way to get food is to buy that something manufactured in a supermarket, rip it open and eat it, or heat it and eat it. However, when you're looking at those macro trends, like do you want to know where your food is coming from and do you want to know what exactly is in it and control it, then 3D food printing, it has to be fast. So it's hard to say how long it takes to do something because we don't have one print speed like a plastic 3D printer will have. We're actually using artificial intelligence and artificial vision in the device so we can watch what's being printed and we can accommodate the different textures. So we can print as fast as possible. It's varying print speeds. So in the pizza example, the pizza dough prints slower because it's a thicker viscosity product. It has to stick to the plate. Then let's say the tomato sauce will, because that's a much thinner sauce, it can go quite fast. So we're actually optimizing for the ingredient that you're printing. So we can do things like crackers in 20 seconds. That personal-sized pizza took about 5 minutes. That butterhead, which was a solid piece of butter and probably about this big, took 2.5 hours. So it really depends on the complexity of your print and, more importantly, the ingredients that you're using.
Thanks. It's me again, Steph. And I just had another question
Sure.
about the 3D print. I think something that could be quite interesting, and I would like to know if you guys have been working on it or if you have any thoughts about this, is more like in regards to health and special diets. So, for example, calorie counting, since it's such a precise machine and it's able to distribute such a specific quantity of food, of produce, or whatever it is. Have you guys been thought about working maybe with athletes, or again, you mentioned before that you guys do work with hospitals, in also not so much providing something that food that has a very precise calorie or nutritional content inside it. Is it something you guys work with?
Yes, so that is something that a lot of companies have come to us asking about. So we as natural machines will never become a food manufacturer. That's not our business, but we are working with food manufacturers. So even though we will always ship with empty stainless steel food capsules, you can mark my words on that, you will always have the option to use your own fresh ingredients. There is a certain market like athletes or certain types of markets that want to have controlled foods being printed so that they want the, let's say, ease of use or control of a pre-filled food capsule. So that will be an option in the future. The keyword is option. But all capsules, whether they're pre-filled or fresh ingredients, have the capability to have this IoT chip on the capsule that will know, to your point, how we will know how much food we're extruding and how much is being printed. So we can do those types of things. So some of the fun things we can do even now is we can do things like print a dessert that stops printing once it hits 200 calories. And we do that in a smart way. We don't just stop printing halfway through a design. We actually figure out what the design has to be first, and we do a complete design or a complete print so it doesn't look like a half-completed dish. And we can do those types of calorie counting. Now, again, with this type of thing, we're keeping it optional. There's a lot of room for data with IoT and doing these types of fun things, whether it's calorie counting or diet monitoring. Keyword there is option. I know sometimes people think the future, the way this is described, that, we're all going to have to count calories or all have data on our meals. And that's not true. You'll have the option to use it. So it's no different than you using optional applications on your phone, for example, to help you with your diet. So yes, that is something where you definitely will see those types of things in the future because it's all about that food customization.
Any other question? Good. Thank you so much. It was very nice to
thank
talk to you and host you virtually inside Microfactory, a place like home. If you will ever be in Milan, you are definitely welcome to come and visit us. We can 3D print our food or do it the old-fashioned way. Thank you very much.
I will definitely take you up on that option. Thank you very much, everybody.
Goodbye. Have a nice evening.